develop yourself in a way that at the end of the day, you can look back and say, I made a difference. I made an impact. I got some things done and added some value to the business today.
Well, we have a great show coming up today. Welcome back, everybody, to the ROI Podcast, presented by the Kelley School of Business on the IUPUI campus here in downtown Indianapolis. I'm Shane Simmons, and sitting beside me once again is Phil Powell, the Associate Dean of Academic Programs here at the Kelley School. Phil, what's going on?
Shane, doing marvelous. Doing great. Great to be back.
Great, Phil. We're glad to have you in here, and we're excited to bring out another episode. And, every week we talk about some of the most innovative ways to develop and grow your professional and personal lives. And we have a lot of fun doing so. But with that being said, in today's episode, you're going to get an up-close view of how one of the greatest business leaders did it. How he developed iconic brands that still thrive to this very day, and some of the inner workings of his mind that allowed him to have an insurmountable success. Phil, tell me a little bit about who we're talking about today.
Shane, we're talking about E.W. Kelley, or affectionately known as Ed Kelley. He's the namesake of the school. He was a Hoosier executive who touched a lot of businesses, and like you said, created brands that have a life today. And he was most famous as the CEO of Steak and Shake. But Ed Kelley lived and breathed the essence of what this business school at Indiana University is all about.
And we're going to be hearing from one of Ed Kelley's close friends and former colleagues, Bob Grimm, who's a clinical associate professor of management here at the Kelley School today.
It was terrific to work for E.W. Ed Kelley. I met Ed in November of 1997. I got lucky. He was looking for a vice president of human resources, and he valued my May company experience, and we connected, and I went to work for him as an officer in his business.
And Shane, when you work with a great executive, when you work with a great leader, you learn a lot just by watching them do business and create value. And Bob says he learned something about Ed right away when he started working with him.
And one of the things I learned early on about Ed was his work ethic. Just an absolutely tremendous work ethic. And he told me early in our relationship, he said, Bob, he said, you'll probably carry me out of here with my boots on. And sure enough, he was true to his word. In addition to his strong work ethic, I mean, he was just an outstanding businessman. He had a personality, Phil, of warmth. He was the consummate Hoosier. He was wonderful when it came to hospitality.
But what many people may not know about the man who was responsible for creating so many household brands, such as Cool Whip, Klondike Bars, A1, and others, was his commitment to keeping himself humble.
Ed was his toughest critic, Phil. I can remember him telling me a story of when he would prepare for a performance appraisal, performance review. He would always do a self-appraisal, and he would put that self-appraisal in the top right desk drawer, right? He was not going to allow a superior of his to be more critical than himself. So he was his toughest critic. So over time, he developed actually this idea of restless dissatisfaction. He always thought, Phil, he could do it faster. He could do it smarter. He could do it less expensively, with more innovation. And frankly, that's a wonderful business attribute and a big part of his legacy that he leaves for Kelley students, this notion of restless dissatisfaction.
Phil, I've heard that term restless dissatisfaction be used with some of the greatest leaders and business folks in the world, and there's really something to that.
Shane, no matter how much success you have, in order to keep that momentum moving forward, we've heard that before, right? The Kelley School, our tagline, from moment to momentum. In order to keep that momentum moving forward, you have to always be improving yourself and your business. And Ed Kelley certainly exemplified that. Bob says that's something everyone can learn from Ed, but he also highlighted a big belief Ed carried with him.
Ed taught me you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So when someone asks you, tell me about yourself, you're prepared to make a really good first impression. I think secondly, Phil, borrowing from my experience with Ed, in every business that I've ever been associated with, what carries the day is getting things done, making things happen, getting results. Ed was a results-oriented executive, and he held all of us to high standards in that regard. Develop yourself in a way that at the end of the day, you can look back and say, I made a difference. I made an impact. I got some things done and added some value to the business today.
And lastly.
And then third, Phil, I would just compliment that. Ed brought a lot of enthusiasm and energy to the table, to his business, and suggested to me that there's no substitute. In business today, you must be enthusiastic. You must be energetic. It is a key characteristic of leadership. I think back on my time with Ed, it was his ability to build relationships. It was his ability to take the time, right, to spend the time with whomever he was visiting with, right, to engage them in conversation, to engage them in dialogue, and to ultimately build a commitment on the part of the other person to moving the business forward. Even late in his life, Phil, he would, when he would come to Indianapolis, he would often stay at the Columbia Club right on the Circle. And late in his life, I remember actually going to the Columbia Club and having meetings with Ed. But there he was, taking the time, investing in each of us from a relational point of view, you know, to get clear on what we needed to do to move the business forward.
So wrapping up, there's a lot that can change in business, in industry, and in the world. But there are some concrete ideas and practices that are timeless, that never age. Ed Kelley, the namesake of the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University, is a shining example of how to lead, motivate, and ultimately win in business. To all of you managers or soon-to-be managers out there, take the time, listen to your employees, make them feel appreciated, while of course still challenge them all the time to do better. And as Ed Kelley would famously say, no matter how successful you become, keep working harder and smarter to achieve more.
What an interview, and it's amazing to me that someone who was so successful in business and in life stayed so humble, and there's so many positive things that people talk about when they mention Ed Kelley's name, and I think that's something that all of us can learn from.
Absolutely, Shane. Success with quiet confidence. An attitude of rolling up your sleeves, getting the job done. Changing your organization from the inside out. These are the values that we espouse at the Kelley School of Business, and we're proud to be a part of.
Very well said. And that's going to wrap up this episode of the ROI Podcast presented by the Kelley School of Business. We've got to thank Kelley Professor Bob Grimm on sharing his stories of Ed Kelley and taking the time to be on the show. And I know from a personal standpoint, I've really learned a lot about who Ed was and what he exemplified.
Absolutely, Shane. And as always, you can stream or download the podcast on iTunes, Google, Podbean, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. And thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you all next week here on the ROI Podcast.